Well, in chapter 29 is the familiar story to us. Jacob comes and he arrives at Haran. You should notice that in the Bible sometimes it says Padan Aram and sometimes it says Haran. We're talking about the same place, but they kind of go backwards and forwards about this. And so we have this basic story that he falls in love with Rachel. We love that story.
This is a love at first sight story.
Absolutely. And he's willing to work for her for 7 years. But then on his wedding night, he finds out that he's been deceived by his father-in-law, right? And so there's some irony here. Jacob, the one who deceives, is now deceived by somebody else. And he receives Leah for his bride when he's expecting Rachel.
And that verse 20, chapter 29, verse 20, is one of those sweet, romantic verses of all the scriptures. And Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed unto him but a few days for the love he had to her. So you can sense this spirit of anticipation. I mean, it wasn't just he fell in love with her at the well and watered her sheep and gave her a kiss. It's he loves Rachel, and he is willing to toil and labor for 7 years in anticipation of being able to have her as his bride. And now the wedding day arrives, and I don't know exactly what their traditions are of how the marriage is performed and all of the ceremony surrounding that. But wow, you now start thinking through what this must have felt like, not just for Jacob and for Rachel, but also for Leah.
Absolutely.
That next morning as he wakes up and he says, wait, you tricked me. This isn't a joyful celebration for everybody involved here.
Yeah. And I'm particularly mindful here of Leah and her thoughts and her feelings here. I'm not sure that God necessarily changes these Jacob's feeling for Leah. But the thing that I love here is that God responds to Leah in this perhaps imperfect, what we would consider an imperfect situation. God doesn't always take our trials and our tribulations away from us. Mortality isn't fair. But I love the way that God blesses Leah also in a way that is important to her and her culture in terms of the status of a woman, and that's through the having of children. And she has a number of children, Reuben and Judah and Issachar and Naphtali and Zebulon. And then I love verse 30, chapter 30, verse 13. And Leah said, so this is really important. Sometimes we've got to not just put our expectations on the text, but what does Leah herself say about this? And verse 13, and Leah said, happy am I, for the daughters will call me blessed. Right? So I think that that's a really important aspect to think about this, that we might think negatively of this, but God is aware of her and gets her to the place where she is also blessed.
So to bring us all up to speed on the storyline here, he had worked for 7 years, anticipating being married to Rachel, ends up being married to Leah. He confronts Laban, his father-in-law, his mother's brother, and says, you beguiled me, you tricked me here. This isn't right. I expect to be married to Rachel. And Laban says, well, you can marry Rachel too, but it wasn't right for us to give the younger daughter when the older daughter wasn't married yet. So if you want to marry Rachel as well, you can. You just need to work 7 additional years, but you can have her on the front end if you fulfill the week. They must have had a tradition of 1 week with Leah. So he does that. So within a matter of, it looks like 7 or 8 days, we're going to have 2 weddings, but now with the agreement that he's going to work for 7 additional years for Rachel. So now he's married to both of them.